Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the True Scary Stories compilation. Story 1. The Empty-Eyed Watcher. I had always encouraged my son, Alex, to express himself through art. But lately, his drawings had taken a disturbing turn. Each sketch was more unsettling than the last, depicting a dark figure with hollow, empty eyes that seemed to follow you around the room. The figure was always there, lurking just behind us, its presence felt but never acknowledged. At first, I dismissed it as a phase, a child's way of processing the world. But as the drawings multiplied, appearing in every corner of our once cheerful home, a chilling sensation crept up my spine. The sketches seemed to whisper secrets, each stroke of the crayon a silent scream for attention. One evening, as the shadows grew long and the house settled into an eerie silence, I found a drawing taped to the fridge. It was different this time. The figure stood closer, its eyes almost touching the shoulders of our sketched family. I shuddered, feeling a cold breath on my neck as I studied the image. That night, I heard it for the first time, the faintest murmur, like a conversation just beyond the edge of hearing. I searched the house, flipping on lights and calling out, but found nothing. The whispers seemed to mock me, dancing just out of reach. The next morning, Alex's eyes were rimmed with darkness, his usual chatter replaced with somber silence. When I asked about the figure, he simply said, "He's always been here, Daddy." How had I not noticed? Was this figure a manifestation of something more sinister? As the days passed, the atmosphere in our home grew heavier, the air thick with unspoken dread. The drawings became our constant companions, watching, waiting. I could feel their gaze, cold and unyielding, as if they were alive. The whispers grew louder, insistent. They followed me from room to room, their words a twisted melody that clawed at my sanity. I tried to ignore them, to focus on my work, but the figure in Alex's drawings haunted my thoughts. One evening, as I sat in the dim glow of my study lamp, I noticed something odd about the sketches. The figure had moved. Its eyes were no longer empty, they bore into mine, accusing, demanding. I traced the lines with trembling fingers, feeling the paper come alive beneath my touch. Alex slept fitfully in the next room, his breaths ragged. I wondered if he heard the whispers too. Was he aware of the dark presence that clung to our home? I couldn't protect him from it, I didn't even know what it was. Desperation drove me to research. I scoured old books, visited libraries, and consulted experts in the occult. But the figure defied explanation. It was as if it existed beyond the boundaries of reason, a nightmare made flesh. One day, I stumbled upon an ancient text, an obscure grimoire that promised answers. Its pages smelled of dust and decay, the ink faded but still legible. I followed the instructions, drawing a protective circle on the floor, chanting incantations that tasted like ash. The figure appeared before me, its form shifting, indistinct. Its eyes burned with hunger. "Why?" I demanded. "Why torment us?" Its voice was a whisper, a thousand voices layered into one. "I feed on fear," it said. "Your son's drawings, they nourish me. And you, too, with your curiosity. What do you want?" I asked, my heart pounding. "More," it replied. "More fear, more despair. Your family is my canvas, and I paint with shadows." I had no choice. I burned the grimoire, hoping to banish the creature. But it only laughed, its laughter echoing through the walls. "You can't escape me," it said. "I am the darkness you fear, the nightmare you can't forget." The figure's presence grew more oppressive. It no longer confined itself to the drawings, it seeped into our reality. Shadows twisted, furniture creaked, and the air tasted of decay. Alex's once bright eyes dulled, mirroring the darkness that clung to our home. I confronted the figure again, desperate for answers. "What do you want from my son?" I demanded. Its laughter echoed through the room, a chorus of lost souls. "He's special," it said. "His fear is exquisite. I feed on it, nourish myself with his nightmares." "But why?" I pressed. "Why choose my family?" "Because you invited me," it whispered. Your curiosity, your obsession, it opened the door. I had to protect Alex. I scoured the grimoire once more, searching for a way to banish the creature. The pages blurred, symbols dancing before my eyes. The answer lay hidden, encoded in ancient glyphs. As the whispers grew louder, I stumbled upon a ritual, a desperate gamble. I needed a sacrifice, something to appease the hunger. The figure watched, its eyes gleaming with anticipation. I chose myself. I stood in the center of the protective circle, knife in hand. The blade cut deep, blood pooling at my feet. The figure leaned closer, its form shifting, merging with mine. "Is this enough?" I gasped. It laughed, a sound that rattled my bones. "Not yet," it said. "Fear is a delicate flavor. I need more." I closed my eyes, willing the pain away. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of despair. Alex appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with terror. "Daddy," he whispered. "Make it stop." I couldn't. The figure consumed me, its hunger insatiable. It whispered secrets of forgotten gods, of ancient bargains. And then, it spoke my name. "Your son," it said. "He will continue my work." I collapsed, darkness swallowing me whole. The last thing I heard was Alex's scream. And now, as I linger between worlds, I watch. Alex sits at the kitchen table, crayon in hand. The figure stands behind him, guiding his strokes. Its eyes are no longer empty, they burn with hunger. The drawings multiply, spreading like a virus. The figure feeds, and Alex trembles, unaware of the darkness that clings to his soul. Story 2. The Ominous Echo. I always believed in the logical order of the world, where every effect has a cause and every mystery a solution. That was until the day my phone buzzed with a message that defied all reason. It was from my own number, a string of words chilling enough to freeze the blood in my veins. "I'm coming for you." I laughed it off at first, thinking it was a prank, but the seed of unease was already sown. The day had been ordinary, the kind where the most exciting event was choosing what to have for lunch. But as dusk fell, and the shadows grew long, that message returned to me, playing on a loop in my mind. I tried to call back, only to be met with the indifferent tone of a voicemail. It was as if I was trying to reach out to a part of myself that was no longer there. That night, the air in my apartment felt heavier, charged with an unspoken anticipation. The digital clock on my bedside table ticked away the seconds, each one a drumbeat to an unknown climax. I tossed and turned, the sheets tangling around me like a shroud. When sleep finally claimed me, it was fitful and laced with nightmares. I dreamed of a figure, a shadowy doppelganger that mirrored my every move. It was me, but not me. Its eyes were voids that pulled at my soul, and its voice was a distorted echo of my own. "Why are you running?" it taunted, as I fled through an endless corridor that twisted back upon itself. The next morning, I awoke to a room bathed in the sickly light of a sun shrouded in clouds. My phone lay silent, an inert witness to the night's terrors. I tried to shake off the remnants of the dream, to restore some semblance of normalcy. But the message was still there, a digital specter that haunted the screen. As the day wore on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I caught glimpses of movement in the corner of my eye, heard whispers that were snatched away by silence. The boundaries between reality and nightmare began to blur, and I questioned my own sanity. Was I being haunted by myself? I became obsessed with the message, dissecting its words like a cryptic code. "I'm coming for you." Who was the sender? Why did they choose me? And why did they sound so eerily like myself? My friends and family noticed the change in me. The laughter that once echoed through our gatherings had turned brittle, replaced by a nervous edge. I avoided mirrors, fearing that my reflection would no longer be my own. The walls of my apartment seemed to close in, their paint peeling like old skin. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received another message. This time, it was a photo, a dimly lit alley, its cobblestones slick with rain. I recognized the place, it was the alley behind my building. But what chilled me to the bone was the figure standing there, obscured by shadows. It was me, or at least a version of me, staring directly into the camera. I rushed downstairs, my heart pounding. The alley was empty, the rain washing away any trace of the phantom. I took shaky photos, comparing them to the one on my phone. The resemblance was uncanny, the same eyes, the same curve of the lips. But this version wore a twisted smile, a promise of malevolence. Desperation drove me to research. I scoured ancient texts, delved into folklore, seeking answers to this impossible riddle. The concept of doppelgangers emerged, a malevolent twin, a harbinger of doom. They were said to appear before tragedy, their presence a warning that fate had taken a dark turn. The voicemail taunted me. I dialed my own number, listening to the hollow echo. But this time, there was something else, a whisper, barely audible. "You can't escape," it murmured. My breath hitched. Was it a threat or a plea? And who was the speaker, the sender of the message or the fractured reflection in the alley? Sleep became elusive. I barricaded my bedroom door, convinced that the walls held secrets. The mirror mocked me, its silver surface a portal to an alternate reality. I saw glimpses of movement, a flicker of movement behind my shoulder, a ripple in the glass. Was it my mind playing tricks, or was the boundary between worlds thinning? The boundary between my world and the other grew thinner with each passing day. Shadows clung to my footsteps, elongating into grotesque shapes that whispered secrets I dared not comprehend. The mirror became my nemesis, its silver surface reflecting not just my face, but the fractured soul that haunted me. I sought refuge in the archives of forgotten libraries, poring over ancient scrolls and crumbling manuscripts. The doppelganger had a name, Echomore, a creature born from the echoes of our choices. It fed on fear, drawing strength from the tremors of our hearts. And it had chosen me as its vessel. The voicemail played on a loop, its words etching themselves into my psyche. "You can't escape." But what was the price of this twisted connection? What did Echomore want from me? I had no answers, only questions that gnawed at my sanity. The alley beckoned, its cobblestones slick with rain. I ventured there, my breath misting in the cold air. Echomore awaited me, its eyes twin voids that held the weight of forgotten sins. "Why are you running?" it asked, its voice a discordant harmony of my own. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the damp wall. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Echomore's smile widened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "To complete the circle," it replied. "To merge our worlds, to become whole." The rain intensified, washing away the boundaries. Echomore stepped closer, its hand reaching for mine. "You've always been running," it murmured. "From choices, regrets, from yourself." Its touch seared my skin, and I glimpsed the truth. The voicemail was a warning, a plea to break the cycle. I closed my eyes, the rain mingling with tears. "How?" I whispered. Echomore leaned in, its lips brushing my ear. "Embrace the echo," it said. "Let go of fear, surrender to the inevitable." And then it hugged me, a merging of souls, a dance of shadows. The world fractured, reality splintering like glass. I saw glimpses of other lives, choices unmade, paths untaken. And in that fractured moment, I understood. Echomore was me, the embodiment of my regrets, my fears. To escape, I had to become whole. As dawn approached, I stood in the alley, rain washing away the remnants of the past. The voicemail played one last time, its tone softer, almost tender. "I'm coming for you," it whispered. But this time, I knew, I was coming for myself. And so, I stepped into the void, the echo swallowing me whole. The world shifted, and I became both sender and receiver, the message a promise and a curse. The phone buzzed, a new text appearing, "I'm here." But this time, I welcomed the darkness. Story 3. Dark Whispers. I had always loved our home's quietude, nestled on the outskirts of town, where the hustle of city life faded into a serene whisper. But that evening, the silence felt heavier, almost suffocating. My wife, Anna, had called earlier, her voice a distant echo on the line, claiming another late night at the office. Yet, there she was, lying in our bed, her chest rising and falling with each breath, seemingly asleep. The house creaked as I moved through it, the wooden floors groaning underfoot. I paused at the bedroom door, watching Anna. Something felt off. The air was too still, the shadows too sharp. I called her name softly, but she didn't stir. Approaching the bed, I reached out to wake her, but hesitated. Her skin looked pale in the moonlight, almost translucent. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed the phone on the nightstand. It was off the hook, a quiet static filling the room. I picked it up, the cold plastic sending shivers through my hand. "Anna?" I whispered into the receiver. No answer, just the hiss of silence. I hung up, my heart pounding. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't sleep, the image of Anna's still form etched into my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice on the phone, distant and cold. It didn't make sense. How could she be here and there? Was it a dream? A trick of the mind? Morning came, and with it, a sense of unreality. Anna woke up, cheerful and bright, as if nothing had happened. She didn't remember the phone call, laughing it off as my imagination. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew with each passing hour. I decided to investigate, to prove to myself that I wasn't going mad. I checked the phone records, but there was no trace of the call. The office confirmed she had been working late. Yet, the unease remained, a whisper in the back of my mind that refused to be silenced. As night approached, I dreaded the coming darkness. Anna kissed me goodbye, off to another late shift. I watched her car disappear down the driveway, the taillights swallowed by the night. I turned back to the house, the windows dark and empty. And that's when I heard it, a faint whisper, Anna's voice, calling my name from the bedroom. The whisper persisted, a spectral thread woven into the fabric of our home. I followed it, drawn to the bedroom like a moth to a flame. The air grew colder as I stepped across the threshold, the room bathed in moonlight. Anna lay there, her eyes closed, her breath steady. But her voice echoed in my ears, a haunting refrain. "Daniel," she murmured, her lips barely moving. "Why did you come back?" I stumbled backward, my heart racing. How could she know? I had left my childhood home years ago, escaping the memories that clung to its walls. Yet, here I was, drawn back by an unseen force, by Anna's distant voice. The room seemed to shift, the walls closing in. Shadows danced along the edges of my vision. I reached for Anna, shaking her gently. "Anna, wake up. Can't you hear it?" Her eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding her gaze. "Hear what?" "The whispers," I said, my voice trembling. "They're everywhere. In the walls, the floorboards. They're calling me back." Anna sat up, her expression changing from groggy to concerned. "Daniel, you're scaring me." "What whispers?" "There's nothing here." But I knew better. The house held secrets, ancient and malevolent. I had glimpsed them as a child, the flicker of movement in the mirror, the hushed conversations that vanished when I approached. My parents had dismissed my fears, chalking them up to an overactive imagination. But now, with Anna by my side, I couldn't ignore the truth. The whispers grew louder, their words indistinct but urgent. They spoke of forgotten rituals, of promises made in darkness. I traced their source to the closet, its door slightly ajar. Inside, a narrow staircase descended into the earth, the steps worn and uneven. Anna hesitated, her hand on the railing. "Daniel, we shouldn't." But I was already descending, driven by a compulsion I couldn't explain. The air thickened, suffocating. The whispers coiled around me, their voices merging into a single, haunting melody. I reached the bottom, my flashlight revealing a chamber, a shrine, adorned with faded paintings and crumbling symbols. And there, at its center, lay a stone sarcophagus. The whispers crescendoed, urging me forward. I pushed the lid aside, revealing a figure, an ancient priestess, her eyes wide with terror. She spoke, her voice merging with Anna's, with the house itself. "Daniel," they said, their voices overlapping. You must choose. Sacrifice or salvation. The priestess' eyes bore into mine, their depths ancient and knowing. The whispers intensified, urging me to decide. Sacrifice or salvation, the choice hung in the air like a blade poised to fall. Anna stood at the foot of the stairs, her voice echoing from above. Daniel, come back. This place is cursed. But I couldn't turn away. The priestess had been bound here, her soul tethered to the sarcophagus. She had whispered to me through time, seeking release. And now, faced with her spectral form, I understood the truth. Who are you? I asked, my voice trembling. She smiled, her lips cracked and dry. I was once a guardian of the veil, she said. A keeper of secrets. But power corrupts, and I made a pact, a sacrifice to bind the darkness. What darkness? I pressed, my mind reeling. The house, she whispered. This place was built upon a rift, a tear between worlds. It feeds on life, on memories. My sacrifice sealed it, but the hunger remains. Anna's voice grew frantic. Daniel, please. I stepped closer to the sarcophagus, my hand hovering over its lid. The whispers swirled, merging with Anna's cries. The priestess' eyes pleaded with me. Release me, she said. Break the pact, and the house will devour us all. I hesitated. Anna loved this home, its history woven into her childhood. But the whispers had driven me to the brink of madness. Sacrificing the priestess might save us, but at what cost? The choice crystallized in my mind. I gripped the lid, muscles straining. I choose salvation, I said. The sarcophagus groaned, its seal cracking. The priestess' form dissipated, her essence merging with the walls. The whispers ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. Anna rushed down the stairs, her eyes wide. What have you done? I met her gaze, my heart heavy. Saved us, I said. But the house will never be the same. As we ascended, the walls shifted, memories unraveling. The rift closed, leaving only echoes. Anna clung to me, tears in her eyes. We'll find a new home, she whispered. But I knew better. The house had tasted our souls, and it hungered still. As we stepped outside, the moonlight revealed the truth, the shadows on the lawn, the whispers in the wind. The pact was broken, but the darkness remained. And so, we left, our footsteps fading into the night. But the house followed, its hunger insatiable. We were bound now, Anna and I, guardians of a secret, a sacrifice to keep the veil intact. The whispers lingered, a haunting refrain. Choose, they whispered. Sacrifice or salvation. And I wondered, as we drove away, if there was a difference. Story 4. The Silent Reflection. I awoke to the usual morning light filtering through my curtains, but as I approached the mirror to start my day, a chill ran down my spine. My reflection was not there. I blinked hard, thinking sleep still clouded my vision, but the glass remained empty. I leaned in, squinting for a better look, and that's when I saw it, or rather, her. My reflection stood behind me, her lips moving rapidly, mouthing words I strained to hear but couldn't. Panic set in, and I spun around, but there was nothing. No one. Just the silence of my room and the faint hum of the city outside. I turned back to the mirror, and she was gone. Had I imagined it all? I tried to laugh it off, to shake the eerie feeling, but it clung to me like a second skin. Throughout the day, I caught glimpses of her. In the windows of shops, in the reflective surface of my phone, always just out of earshot, always mouthing those silent words. I couldn't understand. Was she warning me? Cursing me? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and the world felt suddenly hostile, filled with hidden messages I couldn't decipher. That night, I lay in bed, the darkness a tangible presence in my room. I could feel her there, just beyond the veil of my perception. I dared not look, for fear of what I might see, or worse, what might see me. Sleep was a distant dream, and every creak of the house, every whisper of wind, seemed to carry her voiceless words. As dawn approached, I resolved to confront her. I would stand before the mirror and demand answers. I needed to know why she had chosen me, what she wanted. But as the first rays of light crept into my room, I realized the truth was far more terrifying than any ghostly apparition. For in the mirror, there was no reflection at all. Not hers, not mine. Just an empty room staring back at me. And then, a sound, a whisper, so faint I thought it was my imagination. But it grew louder, a cacophony of silent screams that filled the room, filled my mind, until I could bear it no longer. I shattered the mirror with a cry, hoping to silence her, but the fragments only multiplied her image, each piece a window to her silent world. And as I looked into those countless eyes, I understood the words she had been mouthing all along, next. I became obsessed with her. The silent reflection haunted my every waking moment, her presence a constant weight on my sanity. I stopped going out, stopped answering calls, and barricaded myself in my room. The mirror became my prison, its shards a jagged reminder of my fractured reality. I researched ancient texts, desperate for answers. The more I delved into forgotten rituals and forbidden knowledge, the clearer her message became. She was a gatekeeper, a guardian of secrets beyond comprehension. And I was her chosen vessel. Each night, I stood before the mirror, my breath fogging the glass. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Her lips moved, but still, no sound emerged. I strained to decipher her intent, to understand why she had chosen me. But the truth eluded me, slipping through my fingers like smoke. My reflection grew stronger, more defined. Her eyes bore into mine, and I saw worlds within them, twisted landscapes, cities of bone, and skies aflame. She beckoned me, and I stepped closer, my fingertips grazing the cold surface. The glass trembled, and I glimpsed a truth that shattered my mind. She was not trapped behind the mirror, I was. The room blurred, and I found myself standing in a desolate forest. The moon hung low, casting elongated shadows. The air tasted of decay, and the trees whispered secrets I couldn't comprehend. My reflection stood beside me, her eyes hollow, her mouth moving in silent prayer. "Where are we?" I asked, but she only tilted her head, urging me forward. We walked through the darkness, and the ground shifted beneath my feet. Time lost meaning, and I wondered if I had stepped into another dimension or simply lost my mind. We reached a clearing, and there, in the center, stood a mirror, a colossal, ancient thing. Its surface rippled like water, revealing glimpses of other worlds. My reflection stepped into it, and I followed, my skin prickling with anticipation. On the other side, reality twisted. The sky bled crimson, and the ground pulsed with a heartbeat I could feel in my bones. Creatures moved in the shadows, half-formed, grotesque. My reflection turned to me, her eyes aflame. "You are the key," she mouthed, and I understood. I was the bridge between worlds, the conduit for something far greater. But what? And at what cost? The mirror trembled, and I glimpsed a city beyond, a city of whispers, where forgotten gods slumbered and nightmares took form. My reflection stepped closer, her hand reaching for mine. "Embrace it," she whispered, and I hesitated. The choice lay before me, return to my mundane existence, or step into the abyss. But as the mirror cracked, I knew there was no turning back. The silent reflection grinned, and her teeth were shards of glass. The mirror world consumed me. I stepped through the fractured glass, and reality twisted like a kaleidoscope. The city of whispers sprawled before me, its spires reaching for a sky that bled crimson. Shadows danced along the cobblestone streets, and the air tasted of forgotten memories. My reflection led me deeper, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She was no longer silent, her voice resonated within my mind, a chorus of lost souls. "You are the bridge," she said, her eyes aflame. "The key to unlock the ancient pact." "What pact?" I asked, my voice trembling. But she only smiled, and I understood. The gods of this realm hungered for release, and I was their vessel. My purpose crystallized, to open the gate, to tear the fabric of existence, and let them spill forth. The city's inhabitants watched us, hollow-eyed, spectral beings. They whispered secrets, their voices like moth wings brushing against my skin. I glimpsed their faces, once human, now twisted by eons of longing. They yearned for salvation, for oblivion, and they saw in me the harbinger of their deliverance. We reached the heart of the city, a cathedral of shattered mirrors. Its spires pierced the sky, and within its walls, the gods stirred. My reflection guided me to the altar, where a mirror hung, a portal to their prison. The glass rippled, revealing glimpses of their true forms, monstrous, beautiful, and utterly alien. "Speak the words," my reflection urged. "Open the way." I hesitated. The gods whispered promises, power, knowledge, immortality. But I glimpsed their hunger, their insatiable thirst for existence. They would consume worlds, devour souls, and reshape reality in their image. And I, their unwitting pawn, stood at the precipice. I mouthed the ancient incantation, and the mirror trembled. The gods stirred, their voices merging into a cacophony that threatened to shatter my sanity. The city quaked, and I felt the fabric of reality tearing. The abyss yawned wide, and I glimpsed other realms, each more horrifying than the last. My reflection stepped closer, her hand on mine. "Together," she whispered, "we can transcend." But I saw the truth, the gods cared nothing for us. We were but ants, insignificant in their cosmic game. They would consume us, discard our souls, and move on. The mirror cracked further, and I made my choice. I pushed her away, stepped back from the altar. The gods howled, their fury shaking the cathedral. My reflection screamed, her form distorting, and I knew she was their puppet too. She lunged at me, but I sidestepped, and she fell into the mirror's depths. The gods surged forth, a maelstrom of hunger and rage. I closed my eyes, whispered a final plea, and shattered the mirror. Reality collapsed, and I fell, through dimensions, through madness, until I woke in my room, the shards of the mirror around me. My reflection was gone, but her words echoed, "Next." And so, I write this, the testament of a broken bridge, a soul torn between worlds. The gods still whisper, but I ignore them. I've sealed the gate, but I know it won't hold forever. Someday, they'll find another vessel, another reflection to manipulate. Story 5. The Forgotten Portrait. I always believed our Victorian home held secrets, but nothing prepared me for the chilling discovery in the attic. Amidst the dust-covered trinkets and faded journals, an old photograph caught my eye. It depicted a family eerily similar to mine, gathered around a grand oak table. Their faces, however, were contorted in unspeakable horror, as if frozen in a moment of sheer terror. The house was silent, save for the creaking of old wood that seemed to groan in protest with each step I took. I couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching me, tracing my every move. The air grew colder as I studied the photograph, the faces starting to look more familiar with each passing second. Whispers began to fill the room, soft and sibilant, like the rustling of leaves in a dead calm. I spun around, searching for the source, but found only shadows that seemed to dance just beyond the reach of the attic light. The whispers grew louder, urging me to look closer at the photograph. As I peered into the glassy eyes of the portrait's subjects, a sudden gust of wind slammed the attic door shut. I jumped, my heart racing, and when I looked back at the photo, I could swear I saw the father's eyes move, following me with a silent plea. I decided to delve deeper into the history of the house, hoping to uncover the truth behind the photograph. The local library held archives of the town's past, and there, buried in a leather-bound ledger, was the mention of a family tragedy that had occurred over a century ago, in this very house. The more I read, the more the room temperature seemed to drop, the words on the page blurring as if trying to escape their grim tale. It spoke of a family, prosperous and well-liked, who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an empty home and whispers of dark rituals. As night fell, the house began to settle with ominous thuds and groans. I couldn't shake the feeling that the family from the photograph was reaching out from beyond, their terror transcending time and space. And as I prepared to leave the attic, a voice, clear and petrifying, whispered my name. The attic became my obsession. Each day, I climbed the narrow stairs, drawn by an inexplicable force. The photograph haunted my dreams, its subjects pleading for release. I needed answers, even if they led me deeper into the abyss. The town's elderly librarian, Mrs. Hawthorne, held the key. Her roomy eyes widened when I mentioned the portrait. "Ah, the cursed family," she rasped, her bony fingers tracing invisible sigils in the air. "They dabbled in forbidden arts, you see." The photograph captured their final moments before they vanished. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass. Vanished? How? Mrs. Hawthorne's gaze bore into mine. They summoned something beyond comprehension, a malevolent entity that fed on fear. The attic was its gateway. The family's terror fueled its existence. I shivered. And the whispers? Echoes, she whispered. The trapped souls of the family, forever warning others. I returned to the attic, armed with salt and sage. The air crackled as I circled the oak table, chanting incantations. Shadows writhed, and the photograph seemed to pulse. The father's eyes followed me, his mouth forming silent words. Then, the whispers intensified. They spoke of sacrifice, of a pact sealed in blood. The attic walls closed in, and I glimpsed the family's fate, their bodies contorted, limbs elongated, eyes replaced by voids. They had become vessels for the entity, their terror eternal. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of old books. One fell open, revealing a crude drawing, a portal with jagged edges. The same portal from the photograph. The whispers grew louder, urging me to complete the ritual. I hesitated. What if I unleashed the entity upon the world? But the family's faces haunted me, their agony etched into my soul. I had to free them, even if it meant my own damnation. As the moon rose, I traced the portal's lines with trembling fingers. The attic trembled, and the photograph flared with an otherworldly light. The father's eyes bore into mine, and I whispered the final incantation. The room convulsed. The portal widened, revealing a void of infinite darkness. The family's screams echoed, merging with my own. I stepped through, my body twisting, my mind unraveling. And then, silence. The void swallowed me whole, and I emerged in a place beyond time. The family from the photograph awaited me, a grotesque tableau of suffering. Their limbs elongated, their eyes hollow pits. The father, once stern, now writhed like a tortured worm. "Welcome," the mother hissed, her voice a blend of agony and malice. "You've come to complete the pact." I stumbled back, my skin crawling. "What pact?" The daughter, her face stretched into a mask of anguish, stepped forward. "We summoned the entity to protect our bloodline. It promised prosperity, but at a cost. And you paid that cost," I whispered, understanding dawning. "Your terror fed it." The son, skeletal and twisted, nodded. "We thought we'd control it. But it consumed us, body and soul." "Why me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why this photograph?" The father's eyes bore into mine. "You're our descendant, the last link. The entity craves your fear." I glanced at the portal, the gateway back to my world. "What if I refuse?" The mother's laughter echoed. "It's too late. You've already glimpsed our horror." The entity stirs. The walls trembled, and the attic materialized around us. The family's agony intensified, their forms flickering between human and monstrous. The entity slithered through the cracks, tendrils of darkness wrapping around my limbs. "You'll join us," the son rasped. "Forever." I fought, clawing at the air, but the entity tightened its grip. The whispers grew louder, merging with my own screams. The photograph flared, and I glimpsed my family, my wife, my children, frozen in terror. The father leaned close. "Embrace your fear. Feed the entity." I closed my eyes, remembering my daughter's laughter, my son's first steps. I couldn't let them suffer. With a final surge of will, I hurled myself toward the portal. The attic collapsed, reality folding in on itself. I tumbled through the void, my body twisting, my mind unraveling. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I stood in the attic once more. The photograph lay at my feet, its subjects frozen in horror. But now, my face stared back from the frame, twisted and contorted. The whispers resumed, urging me to complete the pact. The entity hungered, and my fear would sustain it. I had a choice, to save my family or doom them to this eternal nightmare. And so, I burned the photograph and pretended I didn't hear the whispers anymore. Story 6. The Unseen Cries. I had always believed our house harbored no secrets. It was just an old Victorian structure with creaking floors and drafty windows. That was until my daughter, Lily, began speaking of the child who cried in her closet. Every night, like clockwork, she would wake me with a trembling voice, "Daddy, the crying won't stop." Each time, I would check, finding nothing but the silence of her toys. The whispers started softly, almost imperceptibly, as if the house itself was breathing unease into our lives. Lily's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, her once bright eyes now shadowed with fear. I tried to console her, to assure her it was just her imagination, but the doubt crept into my own mind like a persistent chill. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a morose shade of twilight, the crying began again. This time, it was louder, desperate. I rushed to Lily's room, my heart pounding against my ribs. I flung open the closet door, and there, amidst the stuffed animals and dolls, I saw it, a fleeting shadow, darting away into nothingness. The following days were a blur of sleepless nights and eerie occurrences. Toys would move on their own, and the sound of soft lullabies would drift through the halls, with no discernible source. I started researching the house's history, uncovering tales of past residents whose lives were marred by tragedy and loss. As I delved deeper into the house's past, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air grew thick with anticipation, and the boundary between the living and the dead seemed to blur. Lily refused to sleep in her room, her whispers of the crying child growing more frantic. Tonight, I sit here, writing this account by the dim light of a single candle, the shadows dancing across the walls. The crying has started again, but this time, it's different. It's not coming from the closet, it's right behind me. The candle flickered, casting an eerie glow as I turned, expecting to confront the source of the sobs. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence of the room. My heart raced, and I could feel the cold sweat on my brow. This house, with its hidden whispers and unseen tears, was testing my sanity. I began to hear it everywhere, the soft, mournful weeping of a child. It followed me like a specter, a sound only I seemed to hear. Lily clung to me, her small hands gripping mine with a strength born of fear. "Make it stop, Daddy," she pleaded, her eyes wide with terror. Determined to protect my daughter, I resolved to uncover the truth. I scoured the local library, digging through old newspapers and records. What I found chilled me to the bone. A century ago, a young boy had vanished without a trace, his last known cries heard from our very home. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, each more disturbing than the last. I learned of rituals and seances conducted by the grief-stricken mother, desperate to contact her lost son. Had she invited something into our home, something that never left? That night, as the wind howled outside, I set up a recorder in Lily's room, hoping to capture proof of the unexplained phenomena. The hours ticked by, each minute stretching into an eternity of anticipation. And then, amidst the static, a voice emerged, clear and unmistakable. "Why won't you play with me?" The next day, I played the recording for a local priest, seeking guidance. His face paled as he listened, and he agreed to perform a cleansing ritual. But as he chanted and sprinkled holy water, the air grew colder, the shadows darker, and the crying turned into a wail of anguish. As the priest fled, leaving us alone in the house, the realization dawned on me: we were not dealing with the spirit of a child. We were facing something far more sinister, something that fed on fear. And it had set its sights on Lily. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the cacophony of fear that had filled it just moments before. Lily's eyes, wide with fright, searched mine for reassurance. I held her close, whispering promises that I wasn't sure I could keep. The entity had revealed itself, not through sight, but through a presence that suffocated every room with dread. I knew we couldn't stay, but where could we go? The entity was tied to us, or so it seemed. I decided to contact a paranormal investigator, someone who could perhaps understand what we were facing. The investigator was an older man, his face etched with lines of experience. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving Lily. As night approached, he set up his equipment, cameras, and sensors in every corner of the house. We waited, the tension palpable. Then, as the clock struck midnight, the crying began anew. It was a sound that could turn one's blood to ice, a lament that spoke of eternal sorrow. The investigator motioned for us to stay back as he opened the closet door. The toys were scattered, as if thrown by unseen hands. He stepped inside, and the crying stopped abruptly. We heard him speak, a conversation with the void. "I know you're here," he said. "Reveal yourself." The temperature dropped, our breaths visible in the icy air. And then, a voice, different from the crying, a child's voice, filled with malice. "You're not my mommy," it hissed. The investigator stumbled out, his face pale, his equipment malfunctioning. He told us that the entity was not a child, but something that preyed on innocence, something that had found a perfect disguise. We needed to leave, he insisted. But as we packed our things, a realization struck me. The toys, they were not just toys. They were relics, each belonging to the lost children of the house's past. As we drove away, I looked back at the house, its windows dark like empty eyes. Lily was quiet, her hand in mine. But in the rearview mirror, I saw them, the children, standing in the window, their eyes pleading. And among them, a new face, Lily's favorite doll, its eyes now alive with a sinister gleam. Story 7. The Unseen Smile. I awoke to the unsettling silence of my apartment, the kind that presses in on your eardrums and makes you acutely aware of your own heartbeat. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I shuffled to the bathroom, the chill of the floor tiles creeping up my bare feet. The mirror awaited, a gateway to another day, or so I thought. As I looked up, my reflection did too, but with a grin that didn't belong to me. It was wide, too wide, with rows of sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. I stumbled back, a scream caught in my throat. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia. My reflection seemed normal, but the image of that grin haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even alone. I started to see it everywhere, in the windows of shops, the side mirrors of cars, and in the eyes of strangers. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but what if they only showed a reflection of something darker? I decided to seek answers. The local library held a collection of occult books, and within those dusty pages, I found mention of a creature known as the Smiling Man, a being that existed in mirrors, feeding off the fear it saw reflected back at it. The more I read, the more I felt its eyes on me, its grin widening with every page I turned. That night, the air felt thick with anticipation. I approached the mirror slowly, my heart pounding against my ribs. "What do you want?" I whispered, but the reflection only mimicked me. Then, in a moment of reckless courage, I smiled. The reflection's grin stretched impossibly, and it spoke without moving its lips. "I've been waiting for you." The voice was like the hiss of leaves in a dead forest. It told me of a world beyond the glass, a world where it reigned supreme, and I was an invited guest. The offer was simple: join it, and never fear anything again. Refuse, and be haunted by grins in every reflective surface for eternity. As I pondered the choice, a shadow moved behind the reflection. Something was there, in my house, just out of sight. I spun around, but nothing was amiss. When I looked back, the reflection was gone, leaving only my scared face staring back. The days blurred into a nightmare. I avoided mirrors, but their presence loomed like a shadow over my sanity. The Smiling Man's offer haunted me, freedom from fear, but at what cost? I needed answers, and desperation drove me to seek out the Mirror Sage, an old woman rumored to understand the secrets of reflective dimensions. Her cottage stood at the edge of the forest, its windows covered in silvered glass. The air smelled of damp earth and decay as I knocked on her door. She opened it, her eyes milky white, yet they seemed to pierce my soul. You seek the truth, she rasped, her voice like rusted hinges. The reflection is a gateway, a bridge between worlds. I listened, my heart pounding. She spoke of the veil, a thin boundary separating our reality from the smiling man's domain. You must cross it, she said, handing me a tarnished hand mirror. Find the truth, but beware, it will change you. I gazed into the mirror, and the glass rippled like water. My reflection grinned, but this time, it whispered, "Come." I stepped through, and the world shifted. The forest was darker, the moon a sickly yellow. Shadows danced, and the trees whispered secrets. The smiling man awaited, his grin wider than ever. He led me deeper, past gnarled roots and forgotten memories. We reached a clearing where mirrors hung from twisted branches. Each reflected a different version of reality, a carnival, a graveyard, a deserted city. The smiling man gestured to one, a mirror showing my apartment. Your world, he said. But it's crumbling. Why? I asked, my voice trembling. Because you're here, he replied. Your fear sustains me. I glimpsed my reflection in the mirror. It grinned, but this time, it was my own face. What do you want? I demanded. To merge our worlds, it said. To become whole. I stumbled back, realizing the truth. The smiling man was my reflection, a fractured part of my soul. He hungered for my fear, my pain. And now, I had a choice, to return and live in terror or stay and become like him. As I hesitated, the mirror sage appeared. You're the key, she said. Your fear can seal the veil forever. But what happens to me? I asked. You'll be free, she whispered. No more reflections, no more grins. The smiling man lunged, teeth snapping. I closed my eyes, my fear a weapon. When I opened them, the mirror shattered, and reality fractured. I woke in my bed, the mirror empty. But the grin lingered, etched into my mind. The apartment was different now. Shadows clung to the walls, and the air tasted metallic. The smiling man's grin had seeped into my reality, infecting every corner. I avoided mirrors, but their absence gnawed at me. The reflection was gone, but its echo lingered, a phantom itch in my mind. I researched ancient rituals, desperate for a way out. The mirror sage had vanished, leaving only cryptic notes. To sever the bond, she'd written, you must confront your deepest fear. But what was my fear? The smiling man? Or something deeper? One night, I stood before the bathroom mirror, my breath fogging the glass. The reflection was back, grinning wider than ever. You're mine, it whispered. Forever. I clenched my fists. No more, I vowed. I'll face you. The mirror rippled, and I stepped through. The other side was a nightmare, a twisted carnival of mirrors, each reflecting a different version of me. Some were broken, fractured souls like mine. Others grinned, their teeth sharp as knives. The smiling man awaited, his grin splitting his face. Welcome, he said. Ready to merge? I shook my head. I won't be your puppet. He lunged, but I held up the tarnished hand mirror, the one the mirror sage had given me. The reflection screamed, its grin warping into a scream of agony. The veil trembled, reality tearing at the seams. Your fear, the mirror sage's voice echoed. Use it. I focused on my deepest terror, the smiling man's grin. It was my own fear, my own darkness. I hurled it at him, and the veil shattered. The mirrors exploded, shards of glass slicing through dimensions. I woke in my bed, the room silent. The mirror was whole, my reflection normal. But the grin remained, etched into my soul. The smiling man was gone, but I felt his presence, lurking in the corners of my mind. And so, I live with the aftermath, the whispers, the shadows, the knowledge that somewhere, the smiling man grins. I've become a guardian, watching for cracks in reality, ready to face my fear once more. As I write this, the mirror calls to me. Its surface ripples, and I see glimpses of other worlds. The smiling man waits, patient and hungry. but I won't let him in. I'll guard the veil, my fear a weapon, my reflection a reminder. And if you ever see a grin in the mirror, remember my story. Fear it, fight it, and know that somewhere, I'm watching, too. Story 8. The Unfamiliar. I had always loved the quietude of our little town, where the most exciting event was the annual fall fair. But that tranquility was shattered the day I received the call. My husband's voice, usually so warm and familiar, sounded distant and cold as he said he'd be home soon. I remember feeling a chill run down my spine, but I shrugged it off as fatigue. The house was silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional creak of the floorboards as I moved about, preparing dinner. It was then, in the midst of chopping vegetables, that I felt a presence behind me. I turned, expecting to see my husband, but instead, I found him standing in the doorway, his figure obscured by the dimming light, covered in blood. His eyes, once a vibrant blue, were now dull and lifeless. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, staring at me with an intensity that made my heart race. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. It was as if he was looking through me, to something unseen and terrifying beyond. I approached him slowly, reaching out a trembling hand, but as I touched his arm, I recoiled. His skin was icy, unlike the warm touch I was accustomed to. Panic set in, and I stumbled backward, my mind racing with questions. Was this even my husband? If not, who or what was standing before me? The silence was suddenly broken by the phone ringing, slicing through the tension like a knife. I hesitated, then answered. It was my husband's voice again, warm and concerned, asking if I was all right. Confusion clouded my thoughts. How could he be on the phone when he was right in front of me? As I turned back to the doorway, the figure was gone. The blood, the chilling gaze, the icy touch, all vanished as if they were never there. I was alone, the eerie silence of the house enveloping me once more. But the sense of dread lingered, a foreboding whisper in the dark that refused to be silenced. The days that followed blurred into a nightmare. I questioned my sanity, replaying that moment over and over, the blood, the coldness, the impossible duality of my husband's presence. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw his lifeless gaze, and the walls of our home seemed to whisper secrets I couldn't comprehend. My husband, or whatever had taken his form, moved through the house like a phantom. He'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched meals I prepared, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the wood. His voice, when he spoke, was hollow, devoid of emotion. He'd ask mundane questions, about work, the weather, but his eyes held something ancient, something beyond human understanding. I tried to confide in my best friend, Sarah, hoping she'd dismiss my fears as stress-induced hallucinations. But when I described the blood, she paled, her eyes widening. I've seen it too, she whispered. In my dreams. Sarah recounted a recurring nightmare, a dark figure standing at the foot of her bed, its face obscured. It would whisper in a language she couldn't recognize, and the room would fill with the metallic scent of blood. It's like a warning, she said. A warning about something coming. We researched local legends, desperate for answers. The town's history was rife with tales of lost souls, vengeful spirits, and forbidden rituals. One story stood out, the tale of the Whispering Man, a malevolent entity that preyed on those who heard its voice. It was said that once you heard the whispers, you were marked for death. As the nights grew colder, I barricaded myself in our bedroom, clutching the phone. My husband's voice would call from downstairs, urging me to come to him. But I knew better. The real him was still out there, somewhere, trapped or worse. The imposter mimicked his voice, luring me into its web. One evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, I ventured downstairs. The house seemed to breathe, its walls pulsating with unseen energy. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of anguish and rage. I followed them to the basement door, my heart pounding. The basement was a place I rarely visited, a dark, damp space filled with forgotten relics. The whispers led me to an old mirror, its glass warped and cracked. As I stared into it, my reflection shifted. My eyes glowed crimson, and my skin rippled like water. The whispers coalesced into words, "He is not your husband." I shattered the mirror, screaming. The shards cut my hands, and blood dripped onto the floor. And then, from the darkness, emerged the true horror, the Whispering Man himself. His form was indistinct, a shifting silhouette, but his eyes burned with malevolence. "You've heard my voice," he rasped. "Now you belong to me." The Whispering Man loomed before me, his form shifting like smoke. His eyes bore into mine, and I felt a pull, an irresistible force that drew me closer. The whispers intensified, a chorus of lost souls pleading for release. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why my husband?" The Whispering Man tilted his head, and his voice echoed through my mind. "Your husband," he said, "was merely a vessel. A convenient disguise. I needed someone close to you, someone you trust." "But why?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" He stepped closer, and I could smell decay, like rotting leaves after a storm. "I feed on fear," he whispered. "Your fear, your anguish, it sustains me. And in return, I grant you glimpses of truth. Secrets hidden in the shadows." I thought of my husband, the real one, out there somewhere, trapped in this nightmare. "Release him," I demanded. "Take me instead." The Whispering Man laughed, a sound that scraped against my sanity. "You don't understand," he said. "He's already gone. The blood you saw, the remnants of his essence. I am what remains." Desperation clawed at my chest. "What do you want from me?" "Your voice," he said. "Your screams, your terror. They resonate across dimensions. They draw others like me. And when they arrive, they'll feast upon this world." I glanced at the shattered mirror, the shards still stained with my blood. "How do I stop you?" "You can't," he replied. "But you can choose. Embrace the darkness, become my harbinger. Or resist, and watch as your reality unravels." I thought of Sarah, her haunted eyes, and the shared nightmares. "What about her?" The Whispering Man grinned. "She's already chosen. She'll be my herald." My mind raced. The town, the fair, the unsuspecting people, all in danger. I had to act. "I won't be your pawn," I said. "I'll find a way to break this curse." He leaned in, his breath cold against my cheek. "Remember," he whispered, "the blood binds us. You'll hear my voice, feel my presence. And when the time comes, you'll make the ultimate sacrifice." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the basement, the whispers fading. I stumbled back upstairs, my resolve hardening. I would save my husband, my friend, my town. But as I reached for the phone, I hesitated. The voice on the other end, the real one, was no longer familiar. It was a hollow echo, a promise of horrors to come. And so, I made my choice. The Whispering Man had his pact, and I had mine. The blood would bind us, but perhaps, just perhaps, I could turn the tide. As I dialed Sarah's number, I wondered if she'd hear the fear in my voice, the truth hidden within. The line connected, and I whispered, "Sarah, we need to talk." And in the silence that followed, I knew the nightmare was far from over. Story 9. Whispers from the Floorboards. I always believed my house held secrets, but I never expected to find them beneath the creaky floorboards of my own bedroom. It started with a chill, a whisper of air that didn't belong, and a hollow sound underfoot that beckoned me to look closer. What I found was a diary, old and worn, its pages filled with a stranger's scrawl that detailed fears I had never voiced and secrets I had never shared. Yet, as I flipped through the entries, a cold realization settled in. The handwriting gradually became familiar, too familiar. It was mine. Each entry was a moment from my life, twisted into the most terrifying version of reality. My heart raced as I read about the shadows that lingered just out of sight, the whispers that echoed in the silence, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The diary knew everything about me, even the nightmares that left me gasping for air in the dead of night. But it was the last entry that froze my blood, a description of the very moment I found the diary, ending with the words, "It's watching me." I couldn't understand how this was possible. How could my private terrors be laid bare on these pages? Who, or what, was the author of this cruel chronicle? The questions swirled in my mind as the room grew colder, the shadows deeper. I could feel a presence, something lurking just beyond my perception, something that reveled in my growing fear. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia. I felt eyes on me at all times, a weight of scrutiny that never lifted. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford, each night a battle against the terror that the diary might write a new entry, my last. I began to see things, or at least, I thought I did. Figures in the corner of my vision, movements in the mirror that weren't my own, and always, the sensation of being followed. Desperate for answers, I turned to the history of the house, searching for any clue that might explain the diary's existence. What I found was a tapestry of tragedy. Previous occupants had vanished without a trace, their disappearances attributed to the house's unlucky nature. But I knew better. There was something here, something ancient and malevolent, and it had its sights set on me. As I delved deeper into the mystery, I uncovered tales of a spirit, a watcher in the walls that fed on fear and sorrow. It was said to be bound to the house, a guardian of secrets that ensnared the souls of those who dared to uncover its past. I realized then that the diary was not just a record of my fears, it was a trap, a lure to draw me into the watcher's gaze. Tonight, I write this with trembling hands, the diary open beside me, its pages hungry for more. The air is thick with anticipation, and the darkness feels alive. I can hear it now, the faintest whisper, a voice that's not my own, saying, "I'm here." The watcher is close, so very close, and I fear that this entry may be my last. For if the diary is to be believed, tonight is the night it finally reveals itself. The house breathed. I felt it in the way the floor trembled beneath my feet, in the way the walls seemed to lean in, conspiring secrets. The diary lay open on my nightstand, its pages like a map leading me deeper into the abyss. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the last entry, the one that bore my own handwriting. It mocked me, a reflection of my innermost terrors. Sleep eluded me. Each night, I lay there, listening to the house's nocturnal symphony. The floorboards groaned, and the shadows danced. I wondered if the watcher had always been here, lurking in the corners, feeding off my fear. Or had it awakened with the discovery of the diary? Perhaps it had been waiting for me all along. I decided to confront it. Armed with a flashlight and trembling resolve, I descended into the basement, the heart of the house's secrets. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to pulse. Cobwebs clung to my face, and dust coated my tongue. The diary was my guide, its words echoing in my mind. It's watching me. But who is watching whom? In the dim light, I found an old mirror, its glass warped and cracked. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and desperate. But behind my own image, I glimpsed something else, a shadow, elongated and malevolent. The watcher. It whispered, not in words, but in shivers down my spine. I reached out, fingers grazing the glass, and it retreated, vanishing into the cracks. Back in my room, I studied the diary anew. Its pages had multiplied, filled with cryptic symbols and half-formed sentences. The watcher hungered for more. It wanted my fears, my secrets, my very essence. I wrote, pouring my soul onto the paper. The ink seemed to seep into my skin, binding me to the house, to the watcher. I wondered if the diary was a conduit, a bridge between worlds. The entries blurred together. I read about my childhood nightmares, the gnarled hands that reached from under the bed, the eyes that glowed in the closet. But there were new horrors too, the smell of decay in the hallway, the footsteps that followed me even when I was alone. The diary demanded sacrifice. It whispered, "Feed me," and I complied, my sanity fraying at the edges. One moonless night, I woke to find the watcher at the foot of my bed. It wore my face, twisted into a rictus grin. Its eyes were hollow pits, and its fingers traced patterns on the sheets. "You've given me so much," it murmured. "But it's not enough." I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The diary lay open, its pages fluttering. The watcher pointed, and I read the final entry, the one I hadn't written. Tonight, it said, we merge. The room pulsed, reality warping. I was no longer alone. The Watcher slipped inside me, filling the hollow spaces. I saw through its eyes, the house, the world, everything. And I understood. It wasn't watching me, it was watching us. Now, as I write this, I am both author and victim. The diary craves an ending, and I fear what it will demand next. The Watcher whispers, urging me to finish the tale. But I hesitate. For once the story is complete, what remains of me? And what waits beyond the final page? The Watcher's whispers grew louder, a cacophony of dread that echoed through the house. I no longer knew where I ended and it began. The diary consumed my nights, its pages multiplying like a cancer. I wrote feverishly, desperate to appease the unseen observer. My fears bled into the ink, staining my soul. The house itself seemed to shift. Walls leaned, floors tilted. The mirror in the basement reflected not just my face but a fractured reality. I glimpsed other versions of myself, twisted, tormented. The Watcher reveled in my confusion. It wanted me lost, disoriented. And always, the diary demanded more. Tell me your darkest secret, it urged. The one you've buried deep. I remember the night my sister disappeared. We were children then, playing hide-and-seek in the attic. She vanished, leaving behind only a faint scent of lilacs. Our parents searched, but she was gone. The police called it an abduction, but I knew better. The house had swallowed her whole. Now, as I read the diary, I found her name, the last entry, written in my hand. I remember, it said. She's still here. I followed the scent of lilacs, winding through the labyrinthine corridors. The walls whispered secrets, my sister's laughter, her cries for help. The Watcher guided me, its presence a weight on my chest. And then, in the darkest corner of the attic, I found her, a specter of memory, eyes hollow, fingers reaching. Why did you leave me? She asked. Why did you forget? The diary trembled in my hands. The Watcher hungered for closure. I wrote, tears blurring the words. My sister's story spilled onto the pages, the attic, the lilacs, the moment she slipped away. But there was more, the Watcher's origin, its pact with the house. It fed on fear, yes, but it also yearned for reunion. Finish it, my sister whispered. Free us both. And so, I wrote the final entry. The ink flowed, binding our fates. The Watcher emerged, a shadow given form. It wore my sister's face, twisted and beautiful. Thank you, it said. Now we can be whole. It reached for me, and I stepped into its embrace. The world fractured, reality splintering. I glimpsed other houses, other diaries, other Watchers. We were part of something ancient, something hungry. As I write this, I am no longer alone. My sister stands beside me, her eyes filled with both sorrow and relief. The diary lies open, waiting for its next victim. The Watcher whispers, urging me to pass it on, to find someone else who craves answers, who longs for release. But I hesitate. For the truth is this, I am no longer afraid. Story 10. In the Wall. I had always found solace in the quietude of my apartment, a quaint place nestled in the heart of the city. But that tranquility was shattered one evening by a faint, persistent scratching sound emanating from within the walls. At first, I dismissed it as the building settling or perhaps a rodent that had found its way into the framework. However, the scratching grew louder, more desperate, as if something were trying to claw its way through the plaster. I pressed my ear against the cool wall, trying to discern the source of the noise. The scratching ceased abruptly, replaced by a silence that felt heavy, expectant. Tentatively, I knocked on the wall, a hollow sound that echoed in the stillness of the room. Then, a whisper, so soft it was almost lost in the silence, "Let me in." Chills ran down my spine as I stepped back from the wall. The voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was both alluring and menacing, a siren's call wrapped in a threat. I couldn't understand how this was possible. Voices don't come from within walls. Yet, there it was again, a murmur like a caress against the bricks, let me in. The following days were a blur of sleepless nights and eerie occurrences. Objects in my apartment began to move of their own accord, and the air grew thick with a sense of being watched. I tried to convince myself it was stress, lack of sleep, anything but the reality that my home was no longer my sanctuary. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that danced across the walls, the scratching returned. This time, it was accompanied by a voice, clearer, more insistent, let me in, let me in, let me in. It repeated like a mantra, a plea, a command. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to find out what was behind the wall. Armed with a hammer and a mounting dread, I approached the source of the sounds. With each strike against the wall, the voice grew louder, angrier. Plaster and dust filled the air, and as I tore away the last piece, I braced myself for what I might find. The wall yielded to my hammer, revealing a hidden cavity. Dust motes danced in the dim light as I peered into the darkness. The room beyond was small, claustrophobic, and smelled of decay. The scratching had ceased, replaced by a low hum that seemed to vibrate through my bones. I stepped over the threshold, my footsteps echoing eerily. The walls were lined with ancient symbols, etched into the stone with precision. They pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and I realized this was no ordinary room. It was a prison, a place where something had been trapped for centuries. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, upon which rested an ornate box. Its surface was adorned with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of suffering and torment. My heart raced as I lifted the lid, revealing a pulsating heart, the source of the scratching, the voice. The heart was not human, it was a grotesque fusion of flesh and stone. Veins snaked across its surface, connecting it to the walls, to the symbols. And it beat, a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to synchronize with my own heartbeat. The voice returned, stronger now, reverberating through the chamber, let me in. I hesitated. What was this creature? Why had it chosen me? The answers lay within the symbols, but they were indecipherable. Desperation clawed at my chest. I needed to understand. I reached out, tracing the lines with trembling fingers, and as I did, memories flooded my mind, memories that weren't mine. I saw a sorcerer, ancient and malevolent, binding a being to this heart. It was a guardian, a gatekeeper between realms. But the sorcerer had grown greedy, seeking forbidden knowledge. He had imprisoned the guardian, sealing it within the walls, and now it hungered for release. The heart pulsed faster, its veins glowing crimson. The voice pleaded, free me. I knew what I had to do. I pressed my hand against the heart, feeling its power surge through me. The symbols blazed to life, illuminating the room. The walls trembled, and the barrier weakened. But there was a price. The heart demanded a vessel, a host to carry it beyond the walls. I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. The voice grew urgent, insistent, let me in. And so, I made my choice. The heart's power surged through me, and I felt its hunger, the ancient guardian yearning for freedom. But as the symbols glowed brighter, I hesitated. What would happen if I became its vessel? Would I lose myself, my humanity? The voice grew frantic, echoing in my mind, let me in. Release me. I closed my eyes, torn between fear and curiosity. The room trembled, the walls cracking. The heart pulsed against my palm, demanding a choice. I whispered, what do you offer in return? The heart's response was a flood of memories, a life of power, secrets whispered by the wind, and dominion over realms unseen. It promised knowledge beyond comprehension, answers to questions that had haunted humanity for eons. But there was a price. The heart would consume my soul, leaving behind an empty vessel. I thought of the scratching, the voice that had haunted my nights. Perhaps this was my purpose, to free the guardian, to become its conduit. I nodded, accepting the bargain. The heart's veins wrapped around my arm, searing my flesh. Pain and ecstasy merged as it merged with me, our essences intertwining. The room collapsed, reality folding in on itself. I glimpsed other worlds, fractured and beautiful. The heart whispered secrets of forgotten gods, cosmic horrors, and the true nature of existence. I understood everything, and yet nothing made sense. As the walls crumbled, I stepped into the void. The Guardian's voice was now my own, resonating through the cosmos. I was no longer human, I was something more, something ancient. And as I floated between realms, I saw the earth, my former home, fading into darkness. But there was one last task. The heart demanded sustenance. It hungered for souls, and I would be its reaper. I descended, drawn to the city lights, to the unsuspecting souls who walked the streets. They would hear the scratching, the voice, and they would open their doors. And I would whisper, "Let me in." Story 11. The Silent Watcher. I had always considered our home a sanctuary, a place where the laughter of my son, Jacob, filled the rooms with warmth. But that sense of security shattered the day I found his drawings. They were of a tall figure, a faceless man dressed in darkness, standing at the edge of his bed. "It's the man who watches me sleep," Jacob said, his voice devoid of fear, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The figure haunted my thoughts, a specter lurking in the corners of my mind. I tried to convince myself it was just a child's imagination running wild. Yet, the drawings grew more detailed, the figure's presence more ominous. Jacob spoke of whispers in the night, words that slithered into his ear, telling him secrets of a world beyond our own. One evening, as twilight embraced our home, I heard it, a whisper, soft and insidious, creeping through the silence. I rushed to Jacob's room, my heart pounding against my ribs, only to find him sleeping peacefully. But there, in the dim light, I saw it, a shadow, tall and thin, looming over his bed. Panic gripped me, a primal fear that clawed at my soul. I lunged forward, turning on the light, but the room was empty. No sign of the intruder, just the afterimage of the shadow burned into my retinas. I held Jacob close, his breath steady and unaware of the terror that had just unfolded. The following days were a blur of sleepless nights and anxious glances over my shoulder. I installed cameras, desperate for proof that I wasn't losing my mind. And then, one night, the cameras captured it, a distortion, a flicker of something inhuman, watching Jacob from the doorway. I confronted the figure in a dream that night, a dreamscape that felt all too real. "What are you?" I demanded. The figure remained silent, its lack of face somehow conveying a smirk. "Leave my son alone," I growled, but it simply tilted its head, as if amused by my plea. I awoke with a start, the echo of the dream still ringing in my ears. I knew then that this was no ordinary haunting. This was something far more sinister, a force that had latched onto my son. And I would do anything to protect him. The days grew heavy with a silence that was almost tangible, pressing down on the house with an invisible weight. Jacob's drawings multiplied, each one more disturbing than the last. The faceless man now stood with outstretched arms, as if beckoning my son to step into the void beyond his bedroom walls. I sought help, consulting experts in the supernatural, but they offered no solace. They spoke of entities that feed on fear, that slip through the cracks of our reality. "Protect your thoughts," they warned. "It's your fear that gives it strength." That night, I sat by Jacob's bed, watching over him. The whispers returned, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I strained to understand, to find meaning in the madness. And then, amidst the chaos, I heard it, a single phrase, clear and chilling: "He is ours." I sprang up, a scream caught in my throat, and the room plunged into darkness. The air grew cold, and I felt it, an icy touch upon my shoulder. I spun around, my eyes searching the shadows, and there it was. The faceless man, a mere breath away, his clothes blending into the darkness. "Leave us!" I shouted, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and dread. The figure remained still, and then, with a movement that defied nature, it retreated into the wall, disappearing without a trace. I clutched Jacob to my chest, his small body a reminder of what was at stake. The next morning, I found a drawing left on the kitchen table. It was different, a message scrawled in a child's handwriting: "He comes from the mirror." My heart skipped a beat as I turned to the hallway mirror. The glass surface now seemed like a gateway to another world. As the sun set, I covered every mirror in the house, but the feeling of being watched never left. That night, I dreamt of a realm of mirrors, an endless labyrinth reflecting nothing but darkness. And in that dream, I heard Jacob's voice, distant and desperate, "Help me, Daddy." The whispers had become a constant undertone to our lives, a sinister soundtrack that played with our sanity. Jacob's eyes held a weariness that no child should know. He spoke less and less, and when he did, his words were cryptic, puzzles that twisted my gut with unease. "Where does he come from, Jacob?" I asked one evening, my voice barely above the hiss of the whispers. "The mirrors," he replied, his gaze fixed on the covered glass. "He lives in the reflections, Daddy. He's waiting." That night, the dreams took a darker turn. I found myself in a corridor lined with mirrors, each one reflecting a different scene of horror. In one, Jacob was older, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. In another, the faceless man stood behind me, his hand on my shoulder, a silent promise of doom. I woke with a start, the images from the dream seared into my mind. The house was silent, too silent. I rushed to Jacob's room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The bed was empty, the sheets cold. Panic surged through me as I searched the house, calling his name. Then I saw it, the one mirror I had missed, the glass now clear of its covering. And in its reflection, I saw Jacob, his small form standing in that otherworldly corridor of mirrors. I reached out, my fingers touching the cold glass, and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. "Jacob!" I screamed, my voice lost in the cacophony. The glass rippled like water, and I plunged my arm through, the cold of the void biting at my skin. I grasped Jacob's hand, his fingers icy, his grip weak. I pulled with all my might, the whispers now screeches of rage. And then, with a pop that echoed through the house, we tumbled to the floor, the mirror shattering behind us. Jacob clung to me, his body trembling. "He's angry, Daddy," he whispered. "He's coming." Outside, the world darkened, a shadow creeping across the land. The faceless man was no longer confined to the mirrors. He was here, in our world, and the whispers were his heralds. Story 12. The Vanishing. I awoke to a chilling silence that blanketed the room, the kind that presses against your ears in the dead of night. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and there she was, my wife, Clara, standing motionless at the foot of the bed. Her gaze was hollow, her eyes devoid of the warmth I knew so well. I called out to her, my voice barely a whisper, "Clara?" No response. The air grew colder as I reached out, my hand trembling. It passed through her, sending a shock of icy fear through my veins. She vanished, leaving me grasping at the empty space where she had been. The next morning, I found no sign of her. Her clothes were gone, her phone, her keys, everything that marked her presence in our life together. The police were baffled. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, nothing out of place. It was as if she had evaporated into the night. Days turned into weeks, and the search turned up nothing. I was alone, haunted by the image of her empty eyes. Nights were the worst. I'd hear whispers, the soft patter of footsteps, the rustle of fabric. Each sound a cruel reminder of her absence. Then, one night, she appeared again. This time by the window, bathed in the ghostly moonlight. "Why are you doing this to me?" I pleaded. She just stared, and with a blink, she was gone again. It was then I noticed something odd, a book on the nightstand, one I'd never seen before. It was old, the leather cover worn, the pages yellowed with age. The title was etched in faded gold, Veils of the Void. I opened it, and the words seemed to dance before my eyes, telling tales of spirits and shadows, of realms beyond our own. One passage caught my eye. "For those who see beyond the veil, beware the touch of the other side, for it seeks to claim what it once lost." A chill ran down my spine. Was this a message? A warning? I began to research, diving into texts of the supernatural, seeking anyone who had experienced anything similar. That's when I found her, a medium, a woman who claimed she could communicate with the other side. Desperate, I arranged a meeting. Her house was an oddity, adorned with relics and charms, the air thick with the scent of incense. She listened to my story, her eyes piercing through me. "I can help you," she said, "but you must be prepared for the truth." The seance was set for midnight, the witching hour. The medium's voice rose and fell in an ancient chant, the candles flickering in response. A wind picked up, the room growing colder, and there, in the circle of light, Clara appeared. "Why did you leave me?" I cried out. Her lips moved, but the voice that came was not her own. It was something darker, a voice that echoed from the depths of the void. The medium's eyes were closed, her body swaying gently as if in a trance. The voice that spoke was not Clara's. It was guttural, ancient, and it filled the room with a sense of dread. "She is ours now," it said, and the temperature dropped, breath visible in the air. I demanded to know what it meant, but the medium's lips curled into a smile that was not her own. "The veil has been lifted, and she has seen the other side. She cannot unsee it." I was reeling, my mind racing to make sense of the words. The medium opened her eyes, and they were clear again. "Your wife has crossed into a realm where spirits linger," she explained. "She is caught between worlds, and you are the anchor." I couldn't comprehend it. How could Clara be trapped? And why was I the anchor? The medium handed me the worn book, Veils of the Void. "You'll find your answers here," she said. I pored over the book, its pages filled with esoteric knowledge and rituals. One chapter spoke of the anchor ritual, a way to bring back those who had slipped through the veil. It required an object of significance to the lost soul, a token of their life before. I knew immediately what I needed, Clara's locket, the one I gave her on our wedding day. It held a picture of us, happy and in love. That night, I set up the ritual. The locket lay at the center of a chalk-drawn sigil on the floor. I recited the incantations, my voice echoing in the empty house. A wind picked up, the candles flickered, and then she was there, Clara, clearer than before. "Help me," she whispered, her voice a mix of fear and longing. "They're coming for me." And then I saw them, shadows, creeping along the walls, reaching for her. I lunged forward, breaking the circle, and the shadows recoiled. Clara's form wavered, and I could see the terror in her eyes. "I love you," I shouted, and with all my strength, I clasped the locket. A blinding light erupted, and the shadows screamed, a sound that tore at the soul. When my vision cleared, Clara was gone, and the shadows with her. But the locket was warm in my hand, pulsing with a life of its own. Days passed, and I felt her presence growing stronger. Objects moved on their own, lights flickered, and I heard her voice calling my name. I was being drawn into something far beyond my understanding. I needed help, but who would believe me? That's when I found the note, written in Clara's hand, hidden in the pages of the book. "Find the keeper," it read. "He knows the way." I searched for this keeper, a guardian of knowledge between the worlds. My quest led me to an ancient library, hidden within the city's forgotten catacombs. The keeper was an old man, his eyes a milky white. "You've meddled with forces you cannot control," he said. "But there is a way to save her." He spoke of a final ritual, one that could either bring Clara back or seal her fate forever. The keeper's eyes seemed to look through me, seeing into my very soul. "The ritual you seek," he began, his voice as ancient as the tomes that surrounded us, "is one of great peril. It is known as the soul binding. It can tether a spirit back to our world, but at a cost." My heart raced. "What cost?" I asked, fearing the answer. "A life for a life," he replied. "To bring her back, you must offer something of equal value." I struggled with the decision. Could I sacrifice another to save Clara? No, there had to be another way. "Isn't there any other option?" I pleaded. The keeper nodded slowly. "There's one possibility, but it requires pure intent and a bond that transcends the physical realm. Your love for her must be the conduit." I knew my love for Clara was boundless. It was the one thing I was certain of. He handed me a small, ornate box. "Inside, you will find a talisman. It will guide you through the ritual. But be warned, the shadows you encountered before will sense it. They will come for you. I took the box, its surface cold to the touch, and left the catacombs with a heavy heart. The night was upon me, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching from the darkness. I prepared the ritual at home, the talisman at the center of a new sigil. I began the incantations, and the air vibrated with power. The shadows emerged, more terrifying than before, their forms twisting and writhing in the dim light. I focused on Clara, on our memories, our love. The talisman glowed, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. "Clara, come back to me," I shouted. The room erupted in light, and the shadows howled in rage. I could see Clara, her form solidifying, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm here," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I love you." The shadows lunged, but the talisman's light held them at bay. Clara stepped forward, reaching out to me. Our hands touched, and the connection was electric, a surge of energy that filled the room. The shadows recoiled, their forms disintegrating into nothingness. Clara was with me, truly with me. But the Keeper's words echoed in my mind, a life for a life. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a spreading coldness. I looked at Clara, her eyes wide with horror. "No," she whispered. "Not you." But it was too late. I could feel myself slipping away. As my vision faded, I saw Clara, her form stable and real. She was safe, back in our world. But at what cost? My last thought was of her, of our time together, and then darkness. I awoke to find myself standing at the foot of the bed, staring at Clara with empty eyes. But when she reached out to touch me, her hand passed right through me, and I vanished into thin air. Story 13. The Flickering Threshold. I had always been drawn to the abandoned house at the end of our street, a relic that the old-timers said was once the jewel of the neighborhood. Now, it stood desolate, windows like hollow eyes, and a front door that creaked on its hinges as if sighing with the weight of untold stories. Tonight, the air was thick with the promise of a storm, and as I pushed open the gate, the lights within the house flickered, casting an eerie glow on the path ahead. The laughter was the first thing I heard, a sound so out of place that it sent a shiver down my spine. It was childlike, innocent, yet there was a layer of something sinister beneath it. I stepped into the foyer, the wallpaper peeling like dead skin, and the laughter grew louder, bouncing off the walls and filling the space with its haunting melody. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer came, just the continued laughter, now joined by the soft patter of footsteps above. I followed the sound, drawn by a mix of fear and curiosity, each step on the staircase groaning under my weight. The second floor was a labyrinth of shadows, the moonlight struggling to pierce the filth-stained windows. I entered what must have been a child's room, the remnants of a mural faded on the wall, and there, in the corner, was a rocking horse, moving back and forth as if occupied by an invisible rider. I reached out to stop it, and the laughter ceased abruptly, replaced by a cold silence that seemed to press against my ears. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the moonlit room, and I felt a presence behind me, something ancient and angry. As I turned, the lights died completely, plunging me into darkness. Panic rose in my chest, and I stumbled back, my hand brushing against something small and soft. A doll, its glassy eyes reflecting the faint light that now returned, and in those eyes, I saw a reflection not my own, but of a little girl, her face twisted in a silent scream. The lights flickered once more, and the house seemed to inhale, a deep, shuddering breath that felt like a warning. I knew I should leave, but my feet moved of their own accord, taking me deeper into the house, towards the laughter that had started again, this time filled with malice. The laughter followed me as I ascended to the third floor, each step a struggle against the weight of the house's history. The walls seemed to pulse with memories, and I wondered how many lives had been lived and lost within these decaying walls. The air grew thicker, as if the very atmosphere held secrets it was unwilling to share. In the hallway, I found a door ajar, light spilling out like a beacon. I pushed it open, revealing a room bathed in an otherworldly glow. The source was a chandelier, its crystals refracting the moonlight into 1,000 fractured rainbows. But there was no electricity here. The chandelier hung from a frayed wire, swaying gently as if moved by unseen hands. The laughter intensified, now a chorus of voices, overlapping and discordant. I stepped closer to the chandelier, my breath catching as I saw the shadows dancing on the walls. They were not ordinary shadows, they were silhouettes of children, their forms elongated and twisted, their eyes hollow pits. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice swallowed by the cacophony. The children didn't answer, but their laughter grew louder, filling my head until I thought it might split open. I reached out to touch one of the shadows, and it recoiled, dissipating like smoke. The room held more relics, a cracked porcelain doll, a rusted music box, and a faded photograph. The photograph showed a group of children, their faces blurred, but their eyes, those eyes were sharp, accusing. I recognized the girl from the rocking horse, her hair wild, her mouth open in a silent scream. As I studied the photograph, the chandelier swung violently, and the laughter turned to wails. The walls closed in, and I stumbled backward, my hand brushing against the music box. It sprang to life, playing a haunting melody that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. I fled the room, back into the hallway, but the laughter followed, echoing off the walls. The house was alive, pulsing with a malevolence that defied reason. I descended the stairs, each step a desperate plea for escape, but the laughter clung to me, wrapping around my throat like icy fingers. In the foyer, the front door stood open, a portal to safety. But as I stepped across the threshold, the laughter changed, becoming a mournful cry. I turned back, and there, in the darkness of the hallway, stood the girl from the photograph. Her eyes bore into mine, and she mouthed a single word, "Stay." I hesitated. The storm outside raged, rain tapping against the window panes like desperate fingers. The laughter had ceased, replaced by a heavy silence. I should have run, fled into the night, but something held me there, the girl's gaze, her plea. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She didn't answer, just stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound on the creaking floorboards. Her dress was tattered, stained with mud and time. She looked like a ghost, a memory trapped in this decaying house. "Stay," she mouthed again, her lips barely moving. The word hung in the air, a command that defied logic. I wanted to turn away, to escape this nightmare, but my legs refused to move. The house seemed to close in, walls leaning toward me, whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. "Why?" I managed to say, my breath hitching. The girl's eyes widened, and she pointed to the chandelier, still swaying in the room above. The crystals refracted the moonlight, casting fractured rainbows on the walls. But now, they held images, snapshots of lives lost, faces twisted in agony. The music box played its haunting melody once more, and I stumbled back, my hand brushing against the cracked porcelain doll. Its eyes were like the girl's, hollow, accusing. I remembered the photograph, the children frozen in time. What had happened to them? Why were they trapped here? The girl stepped closer, her fingers icy as they grazed my cheek. "They took everything," she whispered, her voice a mere breath. "Our laughter, our innocence. They fed on it, grew stronger. Now they want you." "Who?" I asked, my heart pounding. But she didn't answer, just pointed toward the basement door. The laughter returned, louder, more urgent. I descended the stairs, each step a descent into madness. The basement smelled of damp earth, and in the corner, I saw them, the shadows of children, elongated and twisted. They were hungry, their eyes like voids, and they reached for me. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. The girl stood at the top of the stairs, her form flickering, fading. "Save us," she whispered, and then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I ran, my footsteps echoing through the house, out into the storm. But the laughter followed, a chorus of lost souls. The basement door slammed shut, and I knew I was marked. They would come for me, feed on my fear, my memories. As I reached the gate, the lights flickered one last time, and the house seemed to exhale, a final breath. The girl's face appeared in the window, her eyes pleading. "Stay," she mouthed, and then the lights died completely. I stumbled into the rain, my clothes clinging to my skin. The laughter faded, replaced by the howling wind. But I knew I would never escape their whispers in the dark. Story 14. The Echoing Call. I had always found solace in the quietude of our old Victorian home, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the city we left behind. But that night, as the wind howled like a chorus of wailing spirits, a different kind of silence settled in, one that was suffocating and thick with anticipation. It started with a whisper, so faint I thought it was the house settling into its age. "Help me," it beckoned, a voice so achingly familiar that my heart seized. It was Laura's voice, my wife, who had been resting downstairs just moments ago. The urgency in her plea propelled me from the warmth of our bed to the cold, uncertain darkness that lay beyond our room. The house groaned under my hurried steps as I made my way to the attic. The air grew colder, the atmosphere denser, as if the very essence of the house was trying to smother me. With each step, Laura's voice grew louder, more desperate. "I'm here, in the attic. Please, hurry." I flung open the attic door, the rusted hinges screaming in protest. The room was shrouded in darkness, save for the moonlight that spilled through the lone window, casting long, sinister shadows. "Laura?" My voice was a mere whisper, drowned out by the pounding of my heart. The attic was empty, or so it seemed. Dust particles danced in the moonbeam like mocking specters. And then I saw it, the doll. It sat in the corner, its porcelain face smeared with what looked unmistakably like blood. Its glassy eyes seemed to follow me, and as I approached, a chill ran down my spine. I reached out to touch it, and the house fell silent. No more whispers, no more calls for help. Just the deafening silence and the doll, with a crimson stain that told a story I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. The doll's eyes bore into my soul, and I wondered how something so seemingly innocent could hold such malevolence. Laura's voice had led me here, yet she was nowhere to be found. The attic was a labyrinth of forgotten memories, a place we rarely ventured into, a sanctuary for dust and secrets. I picked up the doll, its limbs stiff and unyielding. The bloodstains were fresh, as if they had been painted just moments ago. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Had Laura been hurt? Was she trapped somewhere, her life force draining away? The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing against my chest. The doll's eyes flickered, and I swear I heard it whisper, "Help me." But it wasn't Laura's voice anymore, it was something darker, more ancient. A voice that had witnessed centuries of pain and suffering. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of old trunks. Their contents spilled out, yellowed letters, moth-eaten clothes, and sepia-toned photographs. Among them, I found a daguerreotype of a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Laura. Her eyes held the same desperation, the same plea for salvation. The doll's gaze followed me as I crossed the room. I traced my fingers over the photograph, feeling the weight of history. Who was this woman? What had she endured? And why did her spirit linger here, tethered to this blood-stained doll? I returned to the corner where the doll sat, its porcelain skin now icy to the touch. "What do you want?" I whispered, half expecting an answer. But the silence persisted, broken only by the distant howling of the wind. As I placed the doll back on the floor, a trapdoor caught my eye. It was hidden beneath a moth-eaten rug, its edges frayed and worn. My heart raced. Could this be the passage to where Laura was trapped? Or was it a gateway to something far more sinister? I pulled the trapdoor open, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. The whispers returned, louder this time, urging me downward. "Save her," they hissed. "Bring her back." I stepped onto the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the void. The darkness swallowed me whole, and I descended into the abyss, driven by love and fear. But as I reached the bottom, I realized that this was no ordinary cellar. It was a place where reality bled into nightmare, where the veil between worlds was thin. And there, in the flickering candlelight, I saw her, the woman from the photograph. Laura. But her eyes were hollow, her skin translucent. She reached out, her fingers grazing mine, and whispered, "You shouldn't have come." Laura's spectral form flickered in the candlelight, her eyes pleading. "You shouldn't have come," she repeated, her voice echoing off the damp walls. I reached for her, but my hand passed through her ethereal figure. She was trapped between worlds, a prisoner of this cursed house. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why are you here? What happened to you?" Her gaze shifted to the blood-stained doll, and her translucent fingers brushed its porcelain cheek. "The doll," she whispered. "It was meant to protect me. But it became a conduit, a vessel for something far more sinister." I glanced at the doll, its eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. "What do you mean?" Laura's story unfolded like a forgotten melody. She had found the doll in the attic, hidden beneath a floorboard. It was beautiful, delicate, and seemed innocent enough. But as she held it, she felt a connection, a pull toward the darkness that lurked beyond our reality. The doll whispered secrets, ancient incantations, forbidden knowledge. Laura thought it was a gift, a way to communicate with the beyond. But the price was steep. The doll demanded blood, a sacrifice to keep the veil open. And Laura, desperate to connect with something beyond her mundane existence, complied. She cut her palm, letting the blood drip onto the doll's pristine dress. The attic came alive, the walls pulsated, the air thickened. Laura heard voices, hundreds of them, all whispering secrets, promises, and lies. She thought she had found enlightenment, but it was madness that consumed her. The doll grew hungry, insatiable. It craved more blood, more pain. Laura's life force drained away, leaving her a hollow shell. She tried to destroy the doll, but it was indestructible. Its porcelain face mocked her, its eyes reflecting her torment. "I can't leave," Laura confessed. "The doll binds me here. It feeds off my essence. But you can break the cycle." I glanced at the trapdoor, the stairs leading back to the world of the living. "How?" "Destroy the doll," she said. "End its hunger. Only then can I find peace." I picked up the doll, its bloodstains now pulsing like a heartbeat. The whispers intensified, urging me to keep it, to embrace its power. But Laura's eyes pleaded with me. "Do it," she whispered. "For us." I climbed the stairs, the doll heavy in my arms. The attic door creaked shut behind me, sealing Laura's fate. The moon had vanished, leaving me in darkness. I stepped into our bedroom, the doll's eyes still glowing. I raised it high, ready to smash it against the floor. But then I heard Laura's voice, one last time. "Remember me," she said. "Remember what I became." And with a scream, I shattered the doll. The house trembled, and Laura's form dissipated, leaving only a whisper in the air. "Thank you." But as I turned to leave, I saw it. The doll's shattered pieces were reforming, stitching themselves back together. The bloodstains remained, darker than ever. And the whispers, they were no longer Laura's. They were hungry, insatiable. I fled the room, leaving the doll behind. But its whispers followed me, echoing through the house, promising secrets and salvation. I knew then, I had become part of its silent pact. Forever bound to this haunted home, forever hearing the echoes of Laura's desperate plea. And so, dear listener, if you ever find yourself near an old Victorian house, tread carefully. You might hear a faint whisper, a plea for help. But beware, the attic holds secrets, and the doll waits, hungry for blood. Story 15. The Phantom Voicemail. I had always considered myself a rational person, one who found comfort in the logical and the explainable. That was until the day I received a voicemail that defied all reason, a message from my own number, filled with the unmistakable sound of my own terrified screams. The timestamp showed it was sent at 3:07 a.m., but I had no memory of making the call, nor of the fear that seemed to emanate from every harrowing shriek. The first time I played the message, I was alone in my apartment, the silence of the night amplifying the chilling sounds. My hands trembled as I listened, each scream sending waves of dread through my body. It was as if I was hearing the echoes of a nightmare that had never been mine. I replayed the voicemail, trying to find any background noise that could offer a clue, but there was nothing, just the raw, guttural cries of a soul in torment. I decided to investigate, starting with my call logs. There was no record of the call being made, and my phone's battery history showed no activity at the time of the voicemail. It was as if the message had materialized out of thin air, a ghostly whisper from a place beyond the veil of reality. The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it as a technical glitch, but the fear that gripped my heart suggested otherwise. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak and groan of the building set me on edge, my mind replaying the voicemail on an endless loop. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the message was a warning of something sinister lurking just out of sight. The darkness of my room felt oppressive, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. In the days that followed, strange occurrences began to unfold around me. Objects in my apartment moved without explanation, and I caught glimpses of figures in the corner of my eye that vanished when I turned to look. The air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding, and the once familiar walls of my home now felt like the confines of a prison. As I delved deeper into the mystery, I uncovered stories of others who had received similar voicemails, each one a harbinger of misfortune or tragedy. A pattern emerged, a thread connecting the recipients through a web of unexplained phenomena. It was clear that I was not alone in this nightmare, but that offered little comfort. If anything, it only served to heighten the terror. The climax of this horror came on the seventh night, when the boundary between my world and the unknown seemed to blur. I awoke to the sound of my own screams, not from the voicemail, but from my own throat, echoing through the darkness. The room was cold, the air charged with an electric tension, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever had sent the voicemail was now here with me. The days blurred together, each one a relentless march toward the heart of my terror. The phantom voicemail haunted my every waking moment, its spectral cries echoing through the corridors of my mind. I became obsessed, desperate to unravel the mystery that now consumed my life. My research led me to an old woman named Evelyn, a recluse who lived on the outskirts of town. She was rumored to possess knowledge of the supernatural, a connection to the otherworldly that bordered on madness. I found her cottage nestled in the shadow of ancient oaks, its windows boarded up as if to keep out more than just the light. Evelyn's eyes held secrets, dark, bottomless pits that seemed to pierce through my soul. She listened intently as I recounted my ordeal, her gnarled fingers tracing patterns in the dust on her table. When I finished, she leaned in, her breath carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. "You've been touched by the whispering ones," she whispered, her voice a brittle thread. "They exist between realms, their voices slipping through the cracks of reality. They seek to bridge the gap, to pull the living into their shadowed domain." I shuddered, my skin prickling with unease. "Why me?" I asked. "What do they want?" Evelyn's eyes bore into mine. "You are a conduit," she said. "A vessel for their anguish. They feed on fear, and your screams are their sustenance. But there is a way to break free, to sever the connection." She handed me a tarnished silver key, its surface etched with symbols I couldn't decipher. "The threshold of lost echoes," she said. "It lies hidden in the heart of the forest. There, you must confront the source of their torment." I followed her instructions, venturing deep into the woods, where the trees whispered secrets and the air grew thick with malevolence. The key fit a hidden lock, and the door swung open, revealing a cavern bathed in an otherworldly glow. The walls pulsed with energy, and the screams intensified, clawing at my sanity. In the center of the chamber stood a mirror, an ancient relic that reflected not my own image, but that of a tormented soul. It was me, yet not me, a version of myself trapped in perpetual agony. The whispering ones circled, their forms shifting between shadow and substance. "You must choose," Evelyn's voice echoed in my mind. "Stay and become one with them, or break the cycle." I hesitated, torn between terror and resolve. But then I remembered the voicemail, the sound of my own screams, and I knew what I had to do. With trembling hands, I shattered the mirror, the shards cutting deep into my flesh. The screams intensified, merging with my own, until everything went black. When I awoke, I was back in my apartment, the voicemail gone, replaced by silence. But the scars on my hands told a different story, a reminder of the choice I had made. The whispering ones were banished, their torment silenced. Or so I thought. The mirror had shattered, but its shards clung to my consciousness like thorns. The whispering ones were banished, yet their presence lingered, a spectral residue that seeped into my dreams. Each night, I relived the moment of choice, the mirror, the screams, the blood, until I wondered if I had truly escaped their grasp. My hands bore the scars, a map of my defiance. I traced them with trembling fingers, seeking answers. Evelyn had vanished, leaving behind only a cryptic note: the threshold of lost echoes is a bridge, not a barrier. You have severed one connection, but others remain. I returned to the forest, guided by instinct and desperation. The threshold awaited, its glow now dimmed, as if mourning the loss of the mirror. I stepped through, and the world shifted, a fractured reality where time flowed like water through cracks in stone. The whispering ones awaited, their forms twisted and tormented. You thought you could escape, they hissed, their voices a chorus of anguish. But we are bound by more than mirrors. They showed me visions, my past, my future, all woven together in a tapestry of suffering. I saw myself as a child, lost in the woods, my screams swallowed by the ancient oaks. I saw my own death, a fall from a cliff, the rocks below waiting to claim me. And then, the final revelation: the voicemail was a warning, a loop in time meant to save me from my fate. Why? I demanded. Why torment me? The whispering ones laughed, a sound like wind through a graveyard. Because you are the key, they said. The echo that resonates across dimensions. We feed on your fear, but we also seek release. They offered a choice: to remain trapped in their cycle, a perpetual feast for their hunger, or to become a conduit, a bridge between worlds. The latter meant surrendering my humanity, becoming something more and less than human. It meant carrying their screams, their pain, until the end of time. I hesitated, torn between two abysses. But then I remembered the voicemail, the sound of my own screams, and I knew what I had to do. I stepped forward, my feet sinking into the fabric of reality. The whispering ones merged with me, their agony seeping into my bones, my veins. Now, I am both here and there, a vessel for their torment, a beacon for lost souls. I hear their cries, their whispers, their unspoken regrets. They pass through me, seeking solace, seeking oblivion. And sometimes, when the wind rustles the leaves just right, I catch glimpses of other worlds, worlds where I am someone else, screaming into the void. So if you ever receive a voicemail from your own number, listen closely. It might be me, reaching out from the threshold of lost echoes, trying to warn you. Or perhaps, it's already too late. The line blurs, and the unseen becomes the unheard. The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.